Hello everyone, I am JT, and this is Women on Death Row. Today for episode 13, we're going to talk about Skylar Sophia Deleon from California. As with every episode in this series, I'm going to be covering this case using primary documentation, provided I could find it. Any sources used will be in the show notes, and if you like this video, hit like, subscribe, hit the notification button. We'll let you know when a new video is posted or we go live. That's the cheapest and easiest way to support us. Now, just as an added warning, the cases discussed in this series may contain the difficult topics and detailed descriptions of assault, violence towards children or other adults, torture, and more. Much of the information comes directly from court documents, and it's based in fact. While this includes the hard stuff, it's important to understand the hard stuff to understand the crime. So please continue cautiously. Finally, at the time of the trial, the pronouns utilized in the court documents are he, him. Skylar now utilizes she, her pronouns. Any mention of the previous pronouns is from the court documents filed at the time and is in no way to show disrespect. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. Skylar Deleon, 29, who had a bit part in an episode of 1990's series Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, faces the death penalty after being convicted of 3 counts of murder at a trial in Santa Ana, California. Deleon was accused of killing Tom and Jackie Hawks in 2004 in order to steal their $500,000 boat and life savings. Deleon was also found guilty of murdering John Jarvey of Anaheim in 2003. Prosecutors had said Deleon met Jarvey in a work program while serving jail time for burglary and killed him in Mexico after Jarvey gave him $50,000. Now let's talk a little bit about the crime. I'm going to let you know it's going to be a longer episode, so strap in. This document that I sourced this info from is People v. Henderson, number G039432 by O'Leary. The evidence at trial established DeLeon, Alonzo Machain, and John Kennedy ruthlessly murdered the Hawks on their yacht, the Well-Deserved, by tying them to an anchor and throwing the anchor over the side. It should be pointed out that the boat is called Well-Deserved, just for clarification. DeLeon posed as a buyer of the yacht, Machain as his friend, and Kennedy as his accountant. At the time, DeLeon and Henderson were married. After Henderson rejected the prosecutor's 2 offers of complete immunity in exchange for her testimony against DeLeon, the people prosecuted Henderson for 2 counts of first-degree murder, based on the theory she used her child to persuade the Hawks that DeLeon was a legitimate buyer, knowing he was going to murder them. Henderson met DeLeon on the internet. Henderson's family and friends described her as kind, loving, loyal, naive, religious, trusting, and hardworking. They described DeLeon as immature, irresponsible, and manipulative, and one who liked to tell far-fetched stories. They explained DeLeon told them stories about not having a family, and either being adopted or being in the foster system and being raised in Mexico by his father's friend Yo-Yo, a wealthy landowner. One friend and neighbor stated DeLeon told her stories about him being in the military and killing people. He also told her that he was a hermaphrodite who needed to have a sex change operation because his uterus was growing and becoming cancerous. There was testimony DeLeon had a sex change operation scheduled for November 30th, 2004. Henderson's friends stated her relationship with DeLeon proceeded quickly, but Henderson began to think DeLeon was not the right person for her and the relationship cooled. But after DeLeon told one of Henderson's friends he was recovering from severe injuries sustained in a near-fatal motorcycle accident, Henderson returned to care for him, and they resumed their relationship. Henderson's friends stated she trusted and supported DeLeon, despite learning he had a family and that he was arrested for armed burglary. Henderson and DeLeon married on September 22, 2001, and shortly thereafter moved into her parents' duplex. In July of 2002, Deleon bought Henderson an approximately $10,000 engagement ring. Henderson was a hairstylist, and Deleon, without a stable job, they were both in severe debt, a fact Henderson shared with family and friends. Soon thereafter, Henderson's parents paid the couple's massive $17,000 credit card bill. And after Deleon pleaded guilty to a December 2002 burglary, her parents paid the monthly $2,100 for Deleon to attend a Seal Beach work furlough jail facility. This is where Deleon met McChain, a jail employee, and John Jarvey, an inmate, who Jarvey's mother described as a counterfeiter with a drug problem. In spring-summer 2003, Henderson became pregnant with the couple's first child. In late summer 2003, Deleon began serving his sentence at the work furlough jail facility. The facility required nonviolent offenders to spend the night at the facility Monday through Saturday and work during the day. In January 2004, the couple's first child, HD, was born, and their second child, KD, was born in February of 2005. At trial, there was testimony Henderson's parents were raising the children. Now, in terms of John Jarvey, sometime in December 2003, Jarvey obtained a $2,600 loan on his van, and the loan company installed a tracking device on the van in case he defaulted. On December 26, 2003, Jarvey and his mother, Betty Jarvey, signed a note and deed of trust on a jointly owned condominium that they had sold, and that was in escrow. Jarvey obtained a $50,000 cashier's check, and by 11:32 a.m., he had $50,000 in cash. That same day, Deleon paid approximately $17,000 in cash to have his boat repaired. He also bought Henderson a matching wedding band for about $2,100 in cash. Finally, he deposited approximately $20,000 in cash into his bank account. The next day, Jarvey went to his mother's house. She gave him $500 for his birthday, and he told her that he was going to Mexico. That same day, Deleon called his cousin, Michael Lewis Jr., and invited him to go surfing in Mexico, and Lewis met him at his house. Deleon told Lewis to drive Deleon's truck and gave him the keys. Deleon also gave him a cellular telephone to use. Deleon drove a sports utility vehicle. After they stopped for breakfast, they drove to a storage yard where they met Jarvey, and Deleon introduced the two men. Jarvey got into the vehicle with Deleon, and Lewis drove the truck. They drove to Mexico. Once over the border, Deleon called Lewis on the cell phone. During the first call, Deleon told Lewis that he was going to drop Jarvey in Mexico. 10 minutes later, Deleon called and said Jarvey had friends that were going to pick him up in Mexico. Lewis thought the calls were strange. They arrived at the surf spot in Mexico, and Deleon said he needed to go to the bank. They drove to Ensenada, where Deleon went into the bank, and Lewis and Jarvey waited outside. When Deleon returned, he told Lewis to follow them. Deleon led Lewis on a back road out of Ensenada, and at some point turned around. Deleon again called Lewis and talked about the house where he would drop off Jarvey. Deleon lost Lewis, and when Lewis caught up with Deleon in a desolate area, Deleon was escorting Jarvey out of the vehicle. Jarvey had something wrapped around his face and appeared to be at ease. Lewis suspected trouble when he decided to drive back to the surf spot. As he was leaving, he saw a white car that appeared to be stopping. Later, Deleon, wearing a different shirt and by himself, appeared at the surf spot and suggested they get something to eat. Unsuccessful in finding a meal in Puerto Nuevo and Carlsbad, they drove to Long Beach and ate. While eating, Deleon said Lewis was, quote, part of the dark side, the devil side. After they ate, Deleon checked himself back into the work furlough jail facility, and Lewis drove the truck to Deleon's home and gave the keys to Henderson. A week or two later, Deleon told Lewis that Jarvey had his throat slit, and the police had questioned him. Sometime later, Deleon called Lewis and told him that Henderson would be calling him and telling him what to say if police questioned him. Henderson called and left a voicemail explaining police were investigating Deleon for Jarvey's murder and to call her back. When he called her back, Henderson told him to tell police the two of them, Henderson and Lewis, went to Mexico to buy Henderson's favorite ice cream. They were both concerned about the police learning Deleon left the country because it would violate his work furlough conditions. The tracking device on Jarvey's van placed it near Deleon and Henderson's residence on 2 different days in early January 2004. In April 2004, Deleon completed his term at the work furlough jail facility. On cross-examination, Lewis stated the alibi concerned his work furlough conditions, but on redirect examination, after having his memory refreshed with a police report, he admitted Henderson told him police were investigating Deleon for Jarvey's murder. In October of 2004, Thomas and Jackie Hawks owned a 55-foot yacht called the Well-Deserved. They lived on the yacht for approximately 2 years, but when Thomas's son announced his wife was pregnant, the Hawks decided to sell the vessel and return to Arizona to spend more time with their grandchild. The Hawks advertised their vessel for sale in a boating magazine for the price of $465,000. In October of 2004, Deleon called Lewis and asked him to go scuba diving. Deleon told him somebody was not going to return from the scuba diving trip. That same month, Deleon asked Adam Rohrig, his scuba instructor, if he would drive a boat while Deleon made 2 people disappear. He also asked Rohrig how to make a body sink. When Rohrig asked Deleon how he would get away with doing that, Deleon replied, quote, "No body, no crime." Also the same month, Deleon asked McChain if he wanted to make a few $1 million. Deleon and McChain had become friends at the work furlough jail facility, and Deleon had secured a new job for McChain. McChain asked him how that was possible without doing something illegal, and Deleon replied, quote, "It isn't illegal unless you get caught." Deleon explained he killed bad people and killed their money, and kept their money. He told McChain there was a couple who was selling a yacht, and he was going to act as a buyer, kill them, and keep the vessel. Deleon showed him pictures of the Well-Deserved and began to plan the crime. McChain testified under a grant of use immunity. On November 1st, 2004, in the afternoon, there was an 8-minute telephone call from Deleon's cell phone to Thomas's cell phone. The next day, Deleon and Henderson met Teresa Rogers, a real estate agent, and Henderson's client. They told Rogers that they were interested in seeing properties in the $2 million range with a 55-foot boat slip. When Rogers asked how they were going to pay for the home, Henderson said the sale of 2 boats. She explained they would be receiving money and a $400,000 yacht in Newport Beach from Deleon's family in Mexico who owed him. Rogers advised them to speak with their accountant. That evening, there was an 11-minute telephone call from Henderson's cell phone to Thomas's cell phone. Deleon and Henderson met with their accountants, David and Joe Ann Zahn. The couple said they would be receiving a large sum of money and a yacht. When asked where the money was coming from, Deleon explained he had gone to jail for possessing drugs as a favor for someone and he was being paid back. Henderson appeared to want the financial matter done legally. On November 3rd, 2004, Deleon and McChain bought 2 stun guns. 2 days later, McChain bought 2 pairs of handcuffs. On the morning of November 6th, 2004, Deleon called McChain twice. After the calls and multiple calls to his father, John Jacobson Sr., Deleon called Henderson. Deleon and McChain drove to Newport Beach to meet the Hawks. Deleon called Henderson again. They parked away from the dock and surveyed the area before calling Thomas. After speaking with his father, Deleon called Henderson twice. Thomas picked them up in a dinghy and took them to the yacht where they met Jackie and discussed the purchase. During the conversation, McChain noticed Deleon's demeanor change, and McChain knew it was not the day to carry out the plan. The plan was for McChain to subdue Jackie and for Deleon to subdue Thomas. As Thomas escorted Deleon and McChain back to the dock in the dinghy, they discussed banks, and Deleon mentioned he was married and had a new baby. Once alone, Deleon told McChain the Hawks had contradictory stories for why they were selling the yacht, and Thomas, a retired probation officer, probably screwed someone. As they drove back to Long Beach, Deleon told McChain he wanted to call Henderson and tell her to meet the Hawks and, quote, make it look like he is really interested in buying the boat. Deleon called Henderson and told her to meet the Hawks and, quote, make them feel more at ease. For the remainder of the day, there were numerous calls between Deleon and Henderson, Deleon and his father, and Deleon and Thomas. At trial, McChain described Thomas, an ex-firefighter and retired probation officer, as, quote, very physically fit for his age. When the prosecutor asked McChain whether Thomas was bigger than Deleon, he responded, "Oh, yes." At some point, Deleon, Henderson, who was pregnant, and their daughter visited the Hawks on the well-deserved. On November 9th, 2004, Deleon and McChain returned to the yacht. The Hawks, who were talkative and appeared more comfortable, took them on a tour of the harbor. On the morning of November 15th, 2004, Deleon called McChain and Henderson. After McChain returned his telephone call, Deleon picked him up, and they drove to Los Angeles to pick up a third person who Deleon had arranged to help him because Deleon realized he was no match for Thomas. Deleon had told the third man the same story he told McChain and offered him the same reward, but the man did not arrive at the predetermined meeting area. After a series of telephone calls between Deleon, Clement, and Gardner, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, that's right, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, arrived at the predetermined meeting spot. Deleon explained the plan. Kennedy agreed, they picked up clothes, and they drove to Newport Beach. Deleon called Thomas when they arrived at the dock, and later he called Henderson. Thomas picked them up in a dinghy, and Deleon introduced Kennedy to Thomas as his accountant. As the well-deserved traveled out to sea, Deleon asked to borrow a wetsuit so he could inspect the yacht's hull. Once the yacht stopped, Deleon inspected the hull, got out of the water, and changed back into his clothes. McChain was in the galley with Jackie, and Deleon and Kennedy were below, in the bedroom, with Thomas. Jackie suddenly exclaimed, "What is going on?" And McChain looked to see Kennedy with his arm around Thomas's neck and Deleon standing next to him. McChain's efforts to stun Jackie were unsuccessful because she fought him off, but he eventually managed to handcuff her. The men put the Hawks, both handcuffed, on the bed. Jackie stated, "Skylar, why are you doing this? We trusted you. You brought your wife and kids. You had them here. How can you do this? We trusted you." Jackie cried and said she did not want to die. The men put duct tape over the Hawks' eyes and mouths. After the men restrained the Hawks, Deleon went upstairs and the yacht resumed traveling out to sea. The vessel's global positioning system showed someone entered 2 waypoints on specific locations at 4:21 p.m. The first waypoint, 33, was 1 1/4 mile outside Newport Harbor, and the second waypoint, 34, was 55 miles off the coast. 6 minutes later, Deleon called Henderson. The men brought Jackie and Thomas upstairs individually, unhandcuffed them, and told them to sign and place their thumbprint on the durable power of attorney form. Deleon told the Hawks that if they complied, he would let them go. The Hawks did as instructed and provided their names, birth dates, social security numbers, and address as Deleon typed the information into his laptop computer. This was about 4:51 p.m. The men took the Hawks downstairs while they continued their trip out to sea. McChain was charged with watching the Hawks. Thomas reached for his wife's hand to comfort her as she cried and said she wanted to see her grandchild. Meanwhile, Deleon and Kennedy retrieved an anchor and rope and took both to the back of the vessel. Near waypoint 33, there was a cell phone call between Deleon and Henderson at 6:25 p.m. Over the course of the next following 22 minutes, there were 4 additional calls between the two. At some point, Deleon and Kennedy duct-taped the Hawks' eyes and mouths again, and the men led the Hawks, who had their hands handcuffed behind their backs, to the back of their yacht. Deleon and Kennedy tied the Hawks together with the rope. The Hawks were tied so Jackie's back rested against Thomas's chest. Deleon was standing behind Thomas, and Thomas, realizing his fate, lifted his right leg and kicked Deleon, sending him flying and crashing onto a deck chair. Kennedy punched Thomas on his right temple, which left him staggering, Jackie using all her strength to keep her husband standing. Deleon tied the Hawks to the anchor. Deleon lifted the anchor and threw it overboard, and Kennedy pushed the Hawks off their yacht. Jackie hit the yacht wall, and the anchor ripped them into the ocean. Deleon turned the vessel around, and the men started searching for valuables. McChain found an envelope with cash, which they divided 3 ways. As they headed toward shore, Kennedy drank a beer while he fished off the back of the vessel. McChain threw the stun guns in the ocean. At 8:56 p.m., Deleon called Henderson from a location where the call was transmitted through a cell tower on Santa Catalina Island. Henderson called Deleon twice minutes later. Using McChain's cell phone, Deleon called Henderson at 9:22 p.m., and the call lasted 4.5 minutes. When they returned to the harbor, Deleon gave McChain the Hawk's cell phone and told him to drive to Tijuana and make a call. At 11:48 p.m., Deleon called Henderson from Newport Beach. Deleon and McChain returned to Long Beach, and McChain drove to San Ysidro and made the call on the Hawk's cell phone. Henderson called Deleon twice around 1:30 a.m. on November 16, 2004, when Deleon was back in Long Beach. On November 17th, Henderson called her father, Stephen Henderson, and asked if he wanted to help clean the well-deserved. After stopping to purchase supplies, Stephen drove to the dock. Henderson seemed happy, and both she and Deleon assured him the sale was legitimate. Deleon and Henderson removed the Hawks' personal items from the bedroom, some of which they kept and some of which they donated. On another occasion, Deleon, Henderson, their child, and Henderson's parents were at the dock when Deleon pointed out the Hawks' car. Stephen asked what prevented them from taking the car if the Hawks left it, and he drove it home. On November 19th, Henderson deposited $1,538 into their joint checking account. A portion of that was cash. Around the same time, Deleon told Rohrig that he needed something notarized, and Rohrig arranged for his friend Kathleen Harris to provide notary services. On November 22nd, 2004, Henderson called Harris and asked her to meet her and Deleon at their hotel in Long Beach. When she arrived, Deleon asked Harris to notarize the durable power of attorney forms the Hawks had signed. When Deleon asked Harris to backdate the notary, Henderson stated November 15th. Deleon gave Harris $2,000, and Henderson said they would give her more money when everything was finalized. Harris testified pursuant to a grant of transactional immunity. They were staying at a hotel because there was a fire at the Hendersons' parents' residence. On November 23rd, Deleon, Henderson, their child, and Stephen drove to Arizona to finalize the yacht sale. The next day, after they had the power of attorney forms recorded, they went to a bank in Kingman. Deleon and Henderson used the power of attorney forms to access the Hawks' bank account, but the manager explained she would have to verify the Hawks' signatures on the forms through their home branch in Prescott. When Henderson asked how to sign as a power of attorney on a check, the manager explained, but Henderson indicated she did not feel comfortable signing Thomas's and Jackie's names, only printing them. Meanwhile, the Hawks family was beginning to worry, because no one had heard from them. On November 22nd or 23rd, 2004, Thomas's brother, James Hawks, went to the yacht and left his business card. On November 24th, 2004, Henderson called James and nervously told him that she and her husband had purchased the well-deserved, and the Hawks told them to take their time in removing their personal items from the vessel. James told her that if she heard from the Hawks, to please have them call him. On November 26th, 2004, Deleon drove the Hawks' car to Ensenada, Mexico, to meet his friend Jose Medrano. Henderson followed in their car. When they arrived, Deleon gave the Hawks' car to Medrano. Medrano, who was not standing near them, saw Deleon and Henderson talking for a lengthy amount of time, and they both seemed worried and nervous. After Deleon and Henderson were unsuccessful in opening a bank account in Mexico, they left. Medrano's father is Yo-Yo. Later that day, Deleon called the Hawks Bank in Prescott to determine whether the bank had received the wired funds and the power of attorney. The bank manager, who had learned the Hawks had disappeared, began to question Deleon about their whereabouts. Deleon was evasive and said he would call back, but he never did. Also that day, Henderson called James and apologized for her demeanor during their previous call. She explained Deleon was searching for the Hawks and wanted to know whether he had heard from them. When James asked her how they paid for the yacht, Henderson hesitated and replied, "They had payment in hand when we left them." At the dock, James heard a voice in the background. James indicated the Hawks family was very worried and they were going to file a missing persons report. Henderson asked him to have the Hawks call her or Deleon if he heard from them, and they would do the same. A few days later, Deleon and Henderson spoke with Kathy Krensick, who handled yacht escrows, about transferring ownership of the well-deserved. Krensick received via fax the bill of sale, but it was not properly notarized because of the Hawks' all-purpose power of attorney. Krensick informed Deleon of the error. When Deleon faxed a new bill of sale, Krensick became suspicious and called the police because of the unusual nature of the power of attorney. Based on the missing persons report and other information discovered during the preliminary investigation, Detectives David Byington and Detective Evan Saylor learned Deleon and Henderson were the last people to see the Hawks. On November 29, 2004, Byington and Saylor found them cleaning a church in Long Beach, and both agreed to be interviewed. Byington interviewed Henderson while Saylor interviewed Deleon. Henderson said she and Deleon purchased a large vessel and the mooring from the Hawks, and they had the sale documents. Henderson admitted she had been on the yacht with her daughter and Deleon, explained Deleon negotiated a purchase price of $265,000, and claimed they paid cash for the yacht from Deleon's acting royalties and real estate investments. After Byington and Saylor compared their stories, Byington told Henderson that Deleon stated they paid $465,000 for the vessel. Henderson apologized for lying, claimed she was scared because of tax consequences, and admitted they paid $465,000. After Byington spoke with Deleon and Saylor with Henderson, Byington confronted Henderson with Deleon's admission the money came from a narcotics transaction. Henderson acknowledged the same. The detectives followed Henderson and Deleon to the hotel to obtain copies of the sale documents, but they could not produce a bill of sale. Henderson said she could. A portion of Byington's interview with Henderson was recorded, and the compact disc was played for the jury. There was testimony Deleon had small parts in the Power Rangers television show. The next day, Deleon, Henderson, and their child went to the Newport Beach police station, where Henderson produced an unsigned bill of sale. At some point, officers learned the Hawks' car had been found in Mexico. On December 16, 2004, Henderson called Byington and told him Deleon obtained the money for buying the yacht by committing a burglary. Soon afterwards, officers learned Deleon had submitted a request to his probation officer to leave the country. While Byington went to Mexico to recover the car, Saylor executed a search warrant at Deleon and Henderson's residence and arrested Deleon. Officers recovered Jackie's laptop, the Hawks' personal documents, videotapes of the Hawks' vacation and holiday, and bags from the well-deserved. A portion of Byington's telephone conversation with Henderson was recorded, and the audio tape was played for the jury. On February 22, 2005, Detective Keith Krallman interviewed Henderson on the telephone. When Krallman asked her whether Deleon ever drove a van, she said detectives questioned them concerning a guy with a van. She explained a guy who Deleon met in jail tried to give them a van because he was going out of town, but they did not want it. And after he left the van at their house, they dropped the van off at a business in Long Beach. Krallman implored her to tell the truth, but Henderson explained she lived with her children and parents and she was afraid of Deleon's father. After he asked what she thought happened to the Hawks, Henderson said she did not, quote, know what happened to them, had nothing to do with their disappearance, and had not been in their car. She eventually acknowledged Deleon drove the Hawks' car to Mexico. Henderson admitted she handled the family's financial affairs. Near the end of the interview, Henderson remembered the man who gave them the van was found in Mexico with his throat slit. Henderson stated neither she nor Deleon killed the Hawks. The interview was recorded, and the compact disc was played for the jury. Officers arrested Henderson in April of 2005. While they were in jail, Henderson wrote Deleon a plethora of letters where she expressed her love for him. She was upset because her parents refused to take her children to visit Deleon in jail. During a taped jail conversation between Henderson and her friend, Henderson was expressing her frustration with her father when she stated, quote, "And it makes you wonder why I, married somebody who doesn't make any decisions." While awaiting trial in jail, Skylar Deleon was charged with soliciting another inmate to murder her cousin and father. Deleon was also accused of killing John Jarvey, a resident of Anaheim, California, who was found dead in Mexico in 2003. Deleon's father and cousin, who was charged as an accessory to the Jarvey murder, was considered, quote, important witnesses in both murder cases. On March 13, 2008, Deleon, who had been born male, partially severed her penis with a razor blade while being held in jail. After receiving medical attention, she was returned to jail the following day. In an interview with ABC's 2020, Deleon indicated that she attempted to cut off her penis because she wanted to be a woman. Defense lawyers claimed that Deleon's need for money to finance sex reassignment surgery was the motivation for the Hawks' murders. In 2019, Deleon's gender was legally changed to female, and Deleon's name is now Skylar Preciosa Deleon. On September 22, 2008, jury selection began in the case against Deleon. In a consolidated case, Deleon was jointly tried for the murders of Thomas and Jackie Hawks and John Jarvey. Despite Deleon's early protestations of innocence, once the trial began, Deleon's attorney conceded that Deleon had indeed committed all three murders. The attorney said she had taken the case to trial only to argue to a jury that Deleon should not be sentenced to death. On October 20th, Deleon was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances for financial gain and multiple victims, and on November 6, 2008, the jury rendered a death verdict. Sentencing was originally scheduled for January 16, 2009, but was then rescheduled to March 20th on request by Deleon's attorney. On March 13th, it was announced that sentencing would again be rescheduled to April 10th, so that the families of the victim could attend. On April 10th, 2009, Deleon was sentenced to death by Orange County Superior Court Judge Frank Fassel. She is on death row at San Quentin State Prison. Thank you for tuning in to Women on Death Row. What a doozy. If you found this content interesting, you can find all this and more at True Crime and Wine Time YouTube channel, as well as in the Courtyard Discord server. Click on the Discord invite link in the show notes and get ready for case files, game nights, daily streaming, and a great community. Until next time, you take care of yourself, your friends, your family, your community. Don't let anybody dull that sparkle. And shine on, you crazy diamonds. Shine on.